Hello everyone, welcome to Enterprise Decoded, a technology podcast about the systems we build and the people those systems are built for. Hi, I'm Anji Maram, and each month we will explore AI, data, and platforms and automations and enterprise systems, not through the hype or buzzwords, but through intentional, empathetic, and humble leadership. Here is the format. In every episode, we will cover the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's working, what's broken, and what we need to face head on. Welcome to Enterprise Decoded podcast. Today, topic is from research to reality. There is a graveyard of enterprise AI pilots that really never made it to production. And brilliant models, impressive benchmarks, and then real investment that gone into building AI. And yet, the systems that reach actual users look nothing like what research promised over the period of time. So here to discuss this topic, we have two great guests. One, Elizabeth Lingg, Director of Applied Research at Thomson Reuters. So I would like Elizabeth to kind of introduce herself a bit. Elizabeth, please welcome to Enterprise Decoded podcast.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Elizabeth Lingg. I'm Director of Applied Research at Thomson Reuters Research Labs. Prior to that, I have about 17 years of experience, and that's in applied AI, applied research, machine learning, as well as software engineering and big data. I've worked at the innovative teams within the large companies. So I worked on the original Copilot team at Microsoft, starting from a hackathon and going to GA 8 months later. I worked on the early days of the Apple Health team, starting with some applications like clinical health records on iPhone, ML algorithms for the Watch and Apple Health app. And then I've also worked at the early stage startups, the cases of a startup acquired by Oracle. Additionally, I recently worked for Contextual AI, a startup that piloted RAG.
I just want to touch upon your experience at Thomson Reuters. You are a Director of Applied Research at Thomson Reuters, and your co-counsel just crossed like 1 million professional users, I believe, across 100 plus countries, I believe. So can you talk a little bit about, because you were in the fault line of research to make it real world, make it production. Can you talk about your achievement in Thomson Reuters?
Sure, absolutely. So Thomson Reuters, I think, is a really exciting place right now due to the depth of data, the specialization, the customer understanding, and the legal expertise. And we recently shipped the next version of CoCounsel, so the next generation, an agentic legal agent that is a product that covers different areas in law. It's fiduciary grade AI, and it has that depth of specialization and structured knowledge that is grounded in Westlaw, practical law, but just absolutely grounded in our expertise and our specialization in law. Additionally, we have other products such as our legal deep research products, which are also, used by users worldwide. So it's been amazing to be part of a company that's transforming itself in terms of AI and technology. We've also acquired a number of startups. So CoCounsel actually comes from a startup acquisition. And then we retain that sort of culture of innovation at TR Labs.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. Welcome to the podcast. We have a second guest today, Garima Agarwal, CTO of Meeru AI. Garima, please introduce yourself a bit.
I'm Garima. I'm the CTO of Meeru AI, where we are building agents for the Office of the CFO. I've been in the engineering and the technology industry for the last 26 years. In the last 10 years, my primary focus has been applied AI. So very similar to Elizabeth, my focus has been applying emerging technologies like machine learning and AI at the intersection of business growth and sort of technology. in my past experience, most recently, I was building my own startup. I have experience across multiple industries over the last 2.5 decades. Started my journey in telecom, transitioned over to mobile, over to retail, and now I'm in finance and tech. I'm super excited about this conversation today. This topic is really, really close to my heart because I have been at the intersection of application of emerging technology and business growth. The challenges are real. So I'm really excited about talking to Elizabeth and to Anji about how these challenges are to be dealt with and how we can actually make a real dent in driving AI into enterprise. So thank you so much for having me.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Garima. The promise of enterprise AI has never been louder, but the gap between a research paper and the production, where the thousands of employees rely on, is massive. What makes the transition from lab to enterprise is so brutally hard, based on your experience, Elizabeth?
I'd say it's definitely a challenge because there are different incentives. So obviously writing a paper, beating the benchmarks, optimizing for a particular data set, that can be certainly, an incentive. I want to do really well in the nuclear data set, for example, and in terms of research, but that's quite different from what you see in production. In production, yes, you do want to optimize towards a particular data set or particular area, especially in a very specialized area like law. However, there's just a lot of constraints on that. Accuracy for fiduciary grade professionals is highly important, right? Additionally, I would say that there's security models, governance models, and those kinds of controls. Enterprise can do really well there. If you're just focused on a research paper, that's typically not something you're thinking about. You can get into latency, for example. So my research intern and I were benchmarking a bunch of deep research models, and he was telling me how slow it is for a researcher. But you can imagine for a customer, you want that understanding of when do you engage the expert or the human in the loop. So I would also say it's very easy to overfit on a small data set when you don't know exactly what the user is going to do. So there's definitely a lot of things you can do to account for this to actually bring the research into production. I would say certainly groundedness. There's a number of benchmarks out there, the FACS groundedness benchmark, RAGAs, etc. You can focus in on that area, especially in regard to your enterprise. Specialization also helps a lot because you can maintain the parametric knowledge while training or doing post-training or context engineering, and in particular for the use case you have in mind. So I think those things can help. It is always a challenge because you have to combine what you actually want the use case to be with the research. And that's both a heavy lift in terms of engineering and science.
In my experience, the prototype that impresses in a demo, it's rarely the architecture that survives even 6 months in production, right? Building for enterprise specifically, it really means building for edge cases, not for average cases. Data ownership, integration complexity, these are underestimated in every early stage AI product, every single one. Research gives you the ceiling. Engineering discipline primarily determines the floor. And the floor is what, to your point, customers experience as well. The first production incident is almost never about the model, in my experience. It's about data retrieval, data quality, data freshness, wrong workflow, automation or assumption. So from an agent quality and production perspective, teams that really been building and deploying something in production at scale are the ones that are focused on velocity and they iterate faster on evaluation loops. They outperform teams which are focused on larger models, but they're slower on processing feedback. That's what my experience has been.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I would add to that I think what you mentioned about evaluation and feedback loops is critical. Mm-hmm. So first of all, knowing when to engage the human or expert in the loop, but additionally making sure you have a robust enough evaluation pipeline that's representative and that you're iterating on that. Once you get the customer bug, you have a regression test in place to guard against it. And that's how I think you can be more successful in this case and acting quickly on the customer feedback.
Great. Thank you. Just if I have to just summarize this, there is really a core tension, AI that works brilliantly in isolation versus that works reliably in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I recently read a framework very similar to what you guys mentioned, which is non-negotiable. We call it as the 3 Gs of enterprise AI readiness. The first one is grounded. Means it's a source traced outputs tied to the verifiable company sources, not the general world knowledge. And then the second G is governed, which is auditable. The same query, same question in the same context must yield predictable, auditable outputs. And then the third one is graduated. So it starts narrow and then scales with the trust and fit with how people actually work, not demanding the change. Right. So I think these are the 3 Gs for the enterprise AI products and solutions too. So Garima showed us the other side of the same truth, right? That the first production incident is almost never the model. It is the data freshness and retrieval failure and a wrong workflow assumption. And both Elizabeth and Garima made the same point from different angles, that the teams that win iterate fastest on evolution loops, not on the model size. So but thank you for that. Thank you for summarizing that. I just thought of summarizing the 3 Gs framework basically. Closing the gap is not primarily a model problem, right? It's an actually architecture and data and then discipline problem. So grounded models do not just perform better in demos, they survive contact with the real world. So now with that, I'll get into the first, the good part of the podcast. When applied research is done right, what does enterprise AI actually deliver? So where are you both seeing it genuinely work? And not just in a demos, but in a production at a scale where real users really use it, and where real users who depend on the system.
So I would say definitely groundedness and also specialization is key. I personally have the hypothesis that it's not just the model and the data, though the data and the structure, the data and the model itself are very critical, but it's beyond that. What is the level of SME expertise? What kind of specialized workflows are valuable to customers? So we at TR have years of this customer experience and customer understanding, as well as editorial and subject matter capabilities. In the legal field, it's not just, using a model, but it's being in the courtroom. How do you negotiate? How do you work with clients, work with judges? And so in understanding when you use that kind of expertise and making the AI model more collaboration, both with the internal SMEs who build this model and your engineers, but also with the users. And how do you have these expert specialized guided workflows? It could be something like for mergers and acquisitions, due diligence. It could be something like transactional drafting or building briefs. But I think those cases, that's certainly a way to have those models in production. Another thing I'd like to say is, legal is all about reading and writing. So write for NLP, language modeling, which is a great area, but having that the structured data behind it and the knowledge graphs and that kind of understanding is valuable, and can really make it work well in production. And yeah, I think of the future where we have robots in the AI agentic worlds, but I do think there's certain spaces that are more ripe for AI than others.
So basically, adoption depends on the trust. Mm-hmm. And that's where the systems that you are working, bringing, along with accuracy, along with faithfulness, and the trust, basically. Yeah.
The trust, and then some of the engineering features you mentioned, like you can have the best dynamic agentic workflow, but optimizing retrieval and the retrieval models is heavily important, as well as those engineering best practices, strong security.
Garima, what does the adoption actually looks like when it is working based on your experience at deploying Meeru AI product to large enterprises. I think that's what's going on currently. What is your take on that?
Yeah, in my experience, AI adds value when it removes a very specific, repetitive, manual, high friction step in an existing workflow, right? So, especially like in the finance and accounting world, like I mentioned earlier, the close process, the reconciliation process, monthly, quarterly close, there's a lot of manual repetitive steps that that accounting teams have to work through, and it's a lot of drudgery work really at the end of the day. So we focus on taking out that drudgery. We focus on empowering our end users to make their sort of CSI work easier and bringing all the data to them, which makes it easier for them to complete their operational workflows with a lot of confidence. To Elizabeth's point, in our world, the auditability of the data, traceability of the reasoning, why did the model come up with this answer? I think that just has to be our top priority in terms of making sure it's not about just getting a answer. AI is by nature, by definition, it's probabilistic, but accounting is not. It's not okay to have even 0.5% off in your answers. So we target that. That's where we start. And at all points of time, we try to make sure that we are keeping our end user at the center of our experience and our product. Measuring, one of our key metrics that we look at is how do we measure the time to value that a pilot takes to convert and bring that really adoption be at the center of our entire operation. When we're focusing on measuring this time to value, these are the sponsors who are going to become our internal champions. These are the users, the end users, and that's how a pilot would typically survive a budget season, when it comes time to review the performance of a particular pilot or a product. So we always start with the workflow that our power users hate the most. They are our most honest evaluators. These are the most vocal advocates that when it works, they will be the ones who will talk about the success of the product and how it helps them. And so adoption metric is a huge part of our success metric evaluation for our own self. The other component, like you also hinted at, Elizabeth, is I want to talk about a little bit is explainability. It's core to the success of any AI product adoption that we are able to trace back how did the model actually come up to an answer. And there's observability has been foundational to engineering, but observability in AI agents is a new concept. And that is something that we are also doubling down on because it's very important from a auditability perspective, especially in finance and accounting, that we're able to take it back and show the sort of the path back to the original source data that was used to derive at that answer. So, we kind of build for the skeptic in the room, and if the most resistant user, they can trust it, then the rest of the team would just follow them. That's how. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what you said about that, the focus on the difficult parts. That goes back to, I think, the specialization. And that's where you can really make it work well for targeted use cases and targeted workflows, right, and expand from there after getting the user feedback.
Domain-grounded models outperform larger than general models on specific workflows, specific domain every time. Garima brought it back to the workflow. Start with the task your power users hate most and measure weekly engagement, not a launch day excitement. 80% of users engaging weekly beats 20% using something occasionally. If you have to put it in a framework, then it would be a widely used framework in the industry. It's called a trust ladder. In this framework, the level 1 users read AI output, and level 2 users act on AI output without independent verification for low-stake tasks. And then the level 3 is users delegate high-stakes decisions to AI with an audit trail. In healthy enterprise deployments, climb this ladder gradually, and the deployments that try to start at level 3 fail. So it's always important to go from level 1 to level 3 because adoption tracks explainability. users engage more when they can see where the answers come from. So really the unlock is not the model. The unlock is actually alignment. The AI that measures the right things and traces back its answers to verifiable sources and then integrates into the workflow that people actually use. That kind of ends the segment good part. So I'll go to the bad part of the podcast where the
Problems happen.
The most enterprise AI deployments under-deliver not because of the technology is bad, but because the conditions around the deployment are wrong. Where do applied research initiatives most commonly break down? And what are those warning signs? We'll start with Elizabeth.
Yeah, I would say certainly some of the warning signs are when you haven't solved the problem that the customer wanted, when you run into sort of a poor user experience, you're not actioning on it, not having the full feedback loop. I would also say, going back to the specialization argument, it's better to prove out a concept really well, an MVP, get your champions, as you mentioned, and make sure it works well. For example, with large language models, they're trained on internet data, and it's very powerful. However, the data in the world and the internet, there's contradictions, there's logical fallacies. So if you're focused on this specialized use case and model, you have your subject matter experts both working as part of the model training, as well as the human in the loop. And they have that depth of understanding. They have the structure, the hierarchy behind it. You can prevent it. I would say other cases, again, not having the optimal security and governance. Someone creates an agent, no one knows what's happening, it goes rogue. So something else you really need to guard against. Certainly, those would be some of the big factors.
Yeah, I think speed pressure plays a big part, especially being as a startup. We're always looking to move at 100 miles an hour. So there's always this sort of temptation to make certain shortcuts, and skipping evaluation rigor is never a good, healthy thing for your models. Just to hit a launch date. That is, I think, number one reason it can cause sort of post-launch trust erosion in my mind. There's also integration debt. When we were working with enterprise companies, integrating with their systems, and there's a variety, a large spectrum of enterprise data systems that can sometimes take 3 to 5 times longer than connecting to sort of demo data systems, right? So the reality of real world integrations is much more complex than demo environments or lower level environments where you have a lot the benefit of clean data and simpler synthetic generated data, but the reality in the real world is very different. The other ones are definitely the CEO demo trap when when we're building for demos and they're not the daily users. They're very different patterns. Like the end user looks for reliability, trust, day-to-day, dependability. On the other side, just demos, they serve a different purpose. They serve the vanity, they serve the promise. And so always focused on the end user has really helped us stay true to our promise. In terms of warning signs, again, just speaking to those customer teams spending more time on preparing data for demos versus using that for product, that means integration is not really ready. Another one would be, the user drop off after a week or two. It's almost always a trust signal. It's not a UX signal. It's an engagement issue, and I would definitely double down on that. Another one that I would call out is that if a pilot needs a few more weeks, right? That means there's something not right, and that if that continues indefinitely, then the pilot will never reach production. So those are some warning signs that I always look for in working with our customers, making sure that we are tracking to our promise and delivery.
That's perfect. I mean, the way you both are explaining, enterprise AI deployments generally break down in remarkably consistent ways. The way Garima added the startup failure models, the speed pressure that shortcuts evaluation rigor, and the integration debt that takes 3 to 5 times longer than expected, and then the trap of building for CEO demo rather than a daily user, right? Interestingly, if you have to put what Garima explained into a concept, a pattern, it's called a pilot decay curve. So most enterprise AI pilots see engagement peak in the weeks 1 and 2 due to novelty effect, and then drop sharply in the week 3 and 4. And that's when the reality makes contact, and either it's a stabilization issue or continued decline, basically. The tracking week 3 retention specifically it predicts production viability. And the clearest early warning signal, a pilot that needs just few more weeks indefinitely is a pilot that will never reach production. The failure mode is not usually the model, it's actually the data, evaluation framework, and the handoff. Now we'll go to the ugly part of the podcast. Enterprise AI at scale touches the decisions that matter most, whether it is a financial analysis or legal documents or breaking news or medical records. When something goes wrong, it goes wrong at scale. So what governance failures are organizations walking into right now based on your experience, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would say certainly cases where you don't have that level of groundedness, or you don't take the time to fully evaluate the engagement, user engagement, retrieval, etc. There's one case of Air Canada. They had a chatbot that said the wrong thing about a bereavement policy, and that actually entered into a lawsuit, and they were held liable, despite claiming, well, it was an AI chatbot, we aren't responsible for what it does as an AI agent. And I'd say that's where certain industries, especially financial and legal, you really need to think in terms of your framework, and in terms of the security and the accuracy. Also, again, I think that's the importance of human in the loop. So you're making sure that it's a partnership between the human and AI. You probably don't want to take something immediately to the courtroom, for example, or to the tax office. That's another thing. So I think you have to really think it through. And to your point about moving quickly, you want to move quickly and ship. You have to. It's competitive. But you also want to have that depth of data behind it and that depth of governance behind it.
When an AI product fails in production, especially the CTO's name is on it. So it's a big part of what I take deep responsibility for. And to your point about moving fast, building the kill switch first, every agentic or high stakes AI output needs a reliable, fast human override, designed in, not sort of bolted on, right? And just continuing on that topic of governance and trust architecture has to be reviewed at every sprint. It's not a quarterly milestone. It's part of the development lifecycle. It's a daily conversation for us. The confidence dial approach is something that we apply to our workflows, which primarily just means that when outputs are above a certain configurable threshold, they will be flagged for human review. This is a compliance unlock for regulated industries like ourselves. Also, senior decision makers, we talked about human in the loop. Senior decision makers, they will not act on AI outputs. They cannot interrogate, and they should not have to. I also talked about traceability. That's a big part of governance, especially in accounting. Our product output has to be traceable. It has to be explainable. So source tracing, explainable AI, it's not just an ethical choice. It's kind of how we actually do things at scale. The real warning sign that I want to call out is that when users are quietly ignoring AI outputs, the deployment has failed, regardless of your accuracy metrics. So those are some of the things that have to be baked into your development processes and your development cycles, regardless of the product or the industry that you're in. That's just sort of table stakes for AI, is how I look at it.
Yeah, and I think quickly reacting and learning from failures is another thing. So, for example, when I was at Microsoft and we had first launched Copilot for early customers, I remember we fixed a bug in a day. We said, tell us and we'll fix it. They said, wow, this is a new area for Microsoft. You're fixing things immediately, which wasn't always the case with some of the legacy products in the past. And then currently at TR with our editorial team, so we have like our newsroom using AI, we have our editors, and they're very in-depth, and they can use our products, dog food, and we can apply statistical methods like active learning, but also we can actively take that feedback and have that constant improvement loop, not just from the models itself trying to improve, but bringing it back, having the humans there and acting on that.
Governance failures are not the abstract risks, right? They're actually the architectural decisions. Some of them were bad that were deferred until it's too late. As Elizabeth framed it at the starting point, the hallucination is not an edge case. It is a system design question. You want the failures, not just the features, and build a kill switch first. Review trust architecture every sprint. Governance is not the thing that slows AI down. It is the thing that lets it keep running. What does the enterprise that gets applied AI right actually look like in 3 years? And what should CTO or AI leader invest in today? Not to chase the latest model release, but to build something that compounds in every enterprise.
Sure. So we at TR are model agnostic, although we do partner with Anthropic, and we also have our own foundational LLM and legal, and we build a lot of specialized tools, or SLMs, which can be highly grounded in the specific use case. And so the future I see is similar to what we're doing in terms of a model agnostic agentic harness. Just like you said, it's not just that we use Claude. We want to go beyond that, and I think for the domain specific areas, there's just so much that can be done in terms of custom agents, whether that's the general purpose co-counsel next generation agent, or you have this highly specialized agent for the litigation drafting and potentially beyond the chat interface with a very detailed document review UI. So there's the application layer, and then the ability to build these customized, specialized applications, both with your own domain models and using the large language models. I see the future. I do think there's a huge environmental impact. There's a huge cost to training these large models. And that's where the specialization and use of the SLMs and the domain-specific foundation models we're training, like Thomson, that comes in. And that's a differentiator. It also means a more competitive market, which is always a challenge for all of us in AI. But I think the competition is great because it also helps us be more creative and look into something I know you're passionate about, the human interaction, the human intelligence layer as well.
I could not agree more. I think enterprise AI winners will not be defined by which foundation model they use. They will be defined by the quality of their proprietary data layer, the workflow integration depth, and their focus on that governance and observability that we talked about earlier. The most durable AI products, they will be invisible. They will be so embedded in the workflow that removing them would basically break down that organizational process. Vertical AI, when you think about that, deeply specialized, deeply integrated, that will outperform horizontal general tools for any enterprise willing to invest. At Meeru AI, our thesis, our goal is not to build an AI feature. We are building an AI native workflow that happens to be a product. We focus on investing in people. To Anji, to your point earlier, that domain knowledge, the domain expertise, really that is at the heart of any successful product and true disruption in enterprise. That doesn't come from the model. It comes from that domain expert, the subject matter expert sitting down and working together with technology and bringing the power of both to the table. So investing in people who understand the domain and the model, that combination is rare, and that is the more valuable I think, component of success in any signal technology. finally, I'll kind of, just the compounding advantage is real is every month of production data, user feedback, that workflow refinement. It's a continuous evolution. It's not a one-time, step. That creates a gap for a later entrant and cannot be closed by just buying a better model. So those are the things that I think will truly make an impact in the future.
So 3 years from now, enterprise AI winners will not be defined by which foundation model they choose. They would be defined by the vertical AI, the domain, the industries that they choose, the AI native applications that are built to focus on particular domain, particular industry, are the ones that are winners. This framework is like the more users lead to more interaction data, which leads to the better model, and which leads to better product, and which leads to more users adapt to that, right? Enterprise AI flywheels are kind of slower to start, but harder to stop once it starts. The organizations who are winning in 2027, let's say, they should have started the flywheel in 2024, not when the next model release arrived, right? And the compounding mode is real. Every month of production data and user feedback and the workflow refinement creates a gap a later entrant cannot close by just buying a better model, basically, right? So the organizations that win are not the ones that adapt AI fastest. They are the ones that build the foundation that lets every subsequent AI decision compound in an organization. Architecture first, evaluation always, and governance from the start. The future belongs to grounded models, not bigger ones. With that, we end today's conversation, inspired by experiences and perspectives of incredible guests here, from Elizabeth and then Garima, the woman leading our industry forward. Until next time, let's get to work.